Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the OneTalk podcast. You have your host, Ryan McCarthy. And today we are joined by Frank Greeff. Frank is the co-founder of RealBase, which is a marketplace for real estate agents, and which he sold to Domain for $180 million. So within today's episode, he touches so much around how he built that, how also he had to build the mindset, the team, the structures, also the journey to get there, to build a business from nothing to 180 million. As you can imagine, there's so much that goes within that. So Frank also shares like leadership skills, purpose and mission, understanding your why, and everything that comes around of building something so significant. Also, Frank is on the journey of raising 7 figures for charity for a cookbook for high performers. So he's on the mission at the moment to create this cookbook. And within his social media, I highly recommend checking it out. He puts up all the meals up there and all the recipes. And he takes you along the journey of him creating this and also showing you the why behind it, the purpose behind it. And also just it's all for a good cause for charity. So really keen for everyone to dive in today's episode and check it out. In other news, if you could please share this podcast around and leave it a rating, it means so much in terms of helping this show grow. And also, OneTalk merch is in the bio of this episode, so check that out as well. Today's episode is sponsored by Arlo Collaborative Gardens, where they strive to support individuals in their journey of self and personal development. At Arlo, they believe that everyone has the potential to achieve their goals and live a truly fulfilling life. Arlo are here to guide and empower both men and women on their unique paths towards personal growth. For their coaching and mentoring programs, Arlo utilize a variety of effective techniques and methods, such as hypnotherapy, which is a powerful tool for positive, long-lasting change, emotional change technique, also known as ECT, which facilitates emotional healing by combining elements of meditation and traditional psychology. Arlo continually explore and integrate various techniques and methods to suit the unique needs of each individual client. These include mindfulness practice, cognitive behavioral therapy approaches, and also breath work and more. Arlo Collaborative Guidance empowers individuals to tap into their inner resources, gain clarity, and develop sustainable strategies to overcome challenges. Whether you are seeking to manage stress, improve relationships, overcome limiting beliefs, or enhance performance in various areas of life, Arlo Collaborative Gardens is here to support you in every step of the way. So please check the link in the bio, check out Arlo Collaborative Gardens, and check out the work they do and get in contact. I can't recommend them enough. But without further ado, let's welcome Frank.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. The marathon continue. Victory lap tonight, though. Victory lap tonight.
Welcome to the OneTalk podcast with Ryan McCarthy.
The marathon continues. That's what you would say.
Welcome, Frank. How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
No worries at all. Thanks for making the time to come down today. I'm really interested to get into your, inspirational story. It's a lot of grit involved, but it just shows the dedication you've had over a certain period of time, and it's paid off by showing up consistently, because a lot of people, when they set goals, they don't realize that it takes a lot of grit, it takes a lot of drive, and it takes a lot of time. But to see you put all those three elements together and to get where you are now, it's super inspirational.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd love to have the listeners here understand a bit about your own story, where you've come from to where you are now. So if you could like to give us just a rundown of the journey of what's been happening.
Yeah, no worries. So I'll give it a high level rundown. So my background is from South Africa originally. My parents moved us to New Zealand when I was about 4 years old. We came from fairly humble beginnings. My dad was frauded in his business, so we kind of came to New Zealand bankrupt. And through there, they were sharpening knives, filleting fish, and picking apples on the weekend. We moved to Australia when I was about 11 years old. So I have three brothers. I always wanted to be a chef. So I started a career as a chef at age 16. I did finish high school. I did not do well at all, not for any other reason than I just loved cooking. So that was where all my heart and soul and energy went into. And after about 3 years, I finished up that. My brother came to me one day. We actually owned a property we lived in together. And he said to me, there's an opportunity to go install real estate signboards in Melbourne. And so probably 6 weeks later, I finished up with work in the kitchen, packed our bags, got in a car and drove to Melbourne and just literally started installing signboards for real estate agents out of a 3-bedroom townhouse in Croydon, Victoria. And so we, after a year, sold that business, came back to Sydney and did it all over again with our third brother. And so that was kind of the journey for the next 5 years. It was pretty... it was reasonably exciting, but it was as mundane as, installing signs by the day, trying to get customers. And then we had a brochure printing arm as well. And so we'd print brochures and, jobs like 10,000 Dropbox letterbox that you had to fold up would come through, and we hated spending money and everything was self-funded. So we would literally 3, 4, 5 hours at a time sit there and fold brochures and just think we're having the best time in the whole world.
Yeah, nice. Just enjoying the journey.
Yeah, just enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
And then the year 5 came as like a pivot moment. And I've talked about this at length, so I won't bore your listeners. If anybody wants to, there's a few podcasts I kind of get into that journey story. But I had a pivotal moment where we decided to do our own brand. We launched a brand called Real Hub, which then focused more on technology. So I guess for everybody's knowledge, the business that we built at that time was ultimately the business that got acquired by Domain. And it was really a marketplace. So it connected real estate agents to real estate suppliers. So every time they want to transact on a property, let's say they need signboards, brochures, realestate.com, domain, et cetera, we help facilitate that.
Yeah,
and so there was a bit of a pivotal moment there in the journey where we kind of made that step to launch that brand and that business. And then from there, we kind of kept rolling for quite some time before ultimately our main competitor in the space about 3 years ago came and asked if we wanted to merge companies. And at that time, we were young, ambitious, enthusiastic, energetic, and we kind of just were like, hey, we're going to be able to do it ourselves. But he had a lot of wisdom, and he said, hey, we can keep fighting, or we can, join forces and ultimately, make a bigger impact together. And so about 6 weeks after that, we merged business. That was the time I became CEO. And from there, ultimately, Realbase is about 1 in every 2 properties that sells in Australia and New Zealand will come through our business. But no one really knows about us. It's a very business to business. Only real estate agents. We're known in that world, but apart from that world, people are like, "Are you a real estate agent?" is the most common question. And then to kind of round off a bit of the journey, I'm obviously very high level. We'll dive in, I'm sure. To round it off, about maybe 18 months ago now, I decided to take the business to a transaction. So it was like a competitive process. There was 10 people involved. You weasel it down to, not weasel it down, it's the wrong terminology. You bring it down gently to 3 people. And then from there you have, a 6-week process at the kind of tail end where you're doing like heavy negotiations. And ultimately that's when Domain acquired our business.
Yeah. When you did like the transaction period, what was going through your mind at the time? Was like a few moment that people get when it's like, I finally reached the end road, or was it like, it's just beginning now?
There was a fair few different moments in that. So it was a really stressful time. I think one of the things that I'm really love sharing is that making sure that, although the scale can be different, someone could be selling 5 million, could be, 200 like ours, or 180, or could be 10 billion. I think the kind of the weight on you is probably equal. I think just seeing the number changes. But there was a few moments in there where I went through like 3-day insomnia bout. I on the final day of the deal, and this is not a place of happiness. It was just like I was just so stressed. I just started crying. I was like on my way driving to work, just crying, bawling my eyes out. I'm super lucky. I have an amazing wife. She's a clinical psychologist, so she's like, "Come home," and I'm like, "I can't come home." Like the weight of this whole thing's on me right now. But then there was a moment. There definitely was a moment. I was really conscious that I wanted to appreciate the wins. Obviously, this is a huge win, right? I'm cognizant that it was an amazing win. But I'd heard the same story over and over again, which was a guy I caught up with and met afterwards. He sold his business for 1.1 billion, right? And he's just said it was like he went through the biggest depression of his life for a year after. So I was really conscious that I didn't want to be that guy. Yeah. So we made sure there were steps in place, whether it be the day the transaction signed. It's very climactic, whatever. Where I'm seeing the lawyers going back and forth. I knew the day this was the day. It's like best and final negotiations are done, the numbers done, everything's done. But now we have to do what the final back and forth, drafting of lawyers stuff. And I was waking up every hour on the hour to see how to come through. And so by the time I woke up, I think it was 4:20 a.m. and the lawyers had worked through the night and they're going back and forth in these emails. So by the time we wake up, you're kind of like, oh, okay, all right, sweet. Now let me go to the gym. But we then made sure we celebrated that. So there was definitely those moments. I will share one thing. I remember I was with the new CEO that acquired our business. We're having a meeting, and like a bomb had just dropped off in the home. In the meeting room, like I could no longer hear anybody. I just see a text from my brothers, and they're like, "Look at your bank account." so that was definitely a fun moment.
Yeah, what was the first thought that went through your head when you checked your bank account?
I couldn't think anything. I literally went to them, like I just had to stop the meeting halfway. I was like, "Do you mind? Sorry, I just really need to go to the bathroom." And I just called my brothers, and we're just freaking out because, like, I think for contextual, for everybody's knowledge is. If you go listen to the story, a big part of the story is our parents are part of the same franchise we were in. They lost their business, and so we had made a promise to the brothers that we were going to pay them back $1 million. And so that moment happened. The first thing we did is call our parents, because what we did is we actually gave them shares before the sale. And so calling them, and then $3.5 million has landed in their account. That was pretty special. And so that was like pretty much the first thing we did. Is we're all really pumped for them.
Yeah, it's like the gratitude for the work you've put in for yourself, but the gratitude that how everyone around you also won from that as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and like I want to go back quickly to the moments where you felt the stress, you felt the pressure, you felt the burnout coming up. Like, what were some of the things you would do to help maybe alleviate that stress and that burnout so you could continue to push through?
Yeah, so this one's going to be quite unique to me. I haven't met someone like this before. Maybe 7 years, I thought my superpower was I don't get stressed. Yeah. So I hear people, it sounds so weird to say this out loud, but I hear people talk about symptoms of stress, anxiety in the chest, all of those kind of things. I never got those. So I'd had it before. So I knew that like I wasn't like, it's not like I was one of those people that cut yourself and you can't feel the pain and you just bleed out. I'd had it before, but like once or twice. So I knew it existed. I knew what the feeling was. And therefore, because I never got that feeling, I was like, I mustn't be stressed. But what would happen is I would go through, I kind of think back to them as seasons. So seasons of really tough work where things that, like we were fully self-funded. So at no stage did we didn't have like, I guess like the warm blanket of $10 million in the bank. It was like we would always have 6-8 weeks of cash in the bank. And like, obviously that becomes proportional over time and then the amount of money becomes bigger, but it's still like 6 to 8 weeks. So I went through different periods post that 7 years when things started really getting really tough, where things would just happen that were really weird, like insomnia. And I was like, I did when I got home on 5:30, 6 p.m. It wasn't crazy. I didn't work crazy hours, but when I got home in these periods, I wouldn't think about work. And so, but what happened is I realized I was subconsciously processing it. So I mentioned my wife's a clinical psychologist. One day I hadn't slept for 3 days and my wife just goes like, let's go for a walk. Like, you got to take the day off work. And I was like, I actually have to. Like, I'm starting to get loopy. And like, I remember I went into work for an hour and I was like, I actually shouldn't be here. This is not good. So anyway, she took me for a walk. We go to Manly. We're overlooking the water. And she's like, just run me through your day. And I was like, run me through the day. She's like, run me through a week, run me through the month. And she goes, that sounds really stressful. And I'm like, nah, like I don't get stressed. Like, remember, you know that. And she's like, no. I think what's happening is like your body is showing signs and symptoms of stress and you're not actually like consciously processing it. And that was a really big unlock moment for me, because what happened from there is I realized, okay, I'm getting stressed. I can't feel it. So what do I have to do? So back to your question was, what do I do in those moments? It's like from that period on, I had to be really conscious about like my forward looking to stress. So what I mean by that is, because I'm not getting the symptoms, I can't manage it acutely. So it can't be like, okay, I'm getting anxiety, therefore like start doing some deep breathing. It's more like, what do I do today that when the stress is there next week, next month, next year, what am I doing today to help me protect that? Yeah. And so some of the things I implemented, like I've always loved training, but like during those seasons, as I call them, where it's like really intense work, that kind of can drop off. Like for me, it's never dropped off below like 3 days. Like I've been training for probably the last 10 years and it'll always be minimum of 3 days. But then I went, okay, I've got to do 5 days a week training. Like I've got to do some cardio. I then started picking up like ice bathing or for everybody there who, may not have access to ice baths, it's like cold showering. And it's like, what are the different rituals that I can do to manage it? The other thing that came out for me, and some people may resonate with this, is what would happen is I'd go through these moments, and I'm not a big drinker, like it's just not my thing, but I go through these moments and then like, and this is how I started to pick up, am I stressed? Is it'd be a Tuesday and I'd be like, oh man, I feel like an icy cold one. Yeah. And then I'd be like, that's weird.
Where's that coming from?
Yeah, I'm like, and it would be those little moments. I would then go, okay, that must be stress. And so then rather than going like, yes, that icy cold one's gonna be delish, I'm like, okay, stop for a moment. Why am I feeling like that? And then kind of like my wife did, is like play back and go, okay, that's stressful, and then like try and bring it to the conscious mind.
Yeah, it's like a warning sign for your mind to say like you're trying to find a way to release stress or find a way to cope.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's good that you're doing things that do like future planning for ice baths are perfect, you know, like your sympathetic nervous system helps regulate across a long time scale.
Yes.
And I guarantee you now, when you get in the ice bath, you probably don't even freak out anymore. No. Just get in normal conversations with people. Yeah. When you first get in, you know, fight or flight. Yeah, exactly.
I officially knew what stress felt like when I first got an ice bath.
Yeah. So like, what are some of your non-negotiables day by day then?
So my non-negotiables are as follows. So every morning I wake up roughly 5. So so today, obviously I get on a flight, so it's 4 a.m., but it's within that hour. So it's within that hour. I then train. So I train when it's colder, I train first. When it's warmer, I ice bath first. So I train. That will look like most of the day's weights training. So like I'm a bodybuilder at heart, even though I don't quite look it. So weights training, and I use that as my social activity. Yeah. So I like stacking my things where I have 3 to 5 gym partners, and I use that as like every day I've trained with either a new person, or some people do 2 days with me, and then by the end of the week I've had 10 hours of social time because I need that. Yeah. And so train, then I ice bath, and then we sauna, and then from there it's probably 6:30 a.m. I go get my wife a coffee, and we have a coffee and kind of chill out before the day starts. Yeah. That's like my. Now, when I say non-negotiable, I am flexible. I'm a flexible human in terms of like, hey, I got to get on a flight this morning at 6 a.m. I got to change some things, right? but it's like if I can hit that 80 to 90% of the time, I'm doing good. Yeah. But then beyond that, it's like, okay, when I get back to home, I try and put certain things in place. So, for example, I have this view that like what you consume is really important. So who you surround yourself with and what you consume. For me, I have certain things that I don't consume, and it works for me. For me, I don't consume the news. I certainly don't consume it on scale. So that's like not how I start my day. It's not how I do my day. Sometimes I'm a bit boring. People like try and have a current affair conversation with me, and I'm like, I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. I had a good one the other day. This will be embarrassing for everybody who has to hear me talk. I had a good one the other day. Someone goes to me, you should get a Matilda on your podcast. And I go, who's a Matilda?
The movie?
the netballers. And I was like, I felt really embarrassed because obviously there's a really hot current affair right then. Yeah. But I was just like, I just don't consume it. And I do it really intentionally. I do it because it is good to consume. It's fun and it's like, oh, it's like interesting. But the reality is fear sells, and like 97% of what's on the news is fear-based. And like I heard it really good from someone on a podcast once, which was like, we come from, back in cave people days, we come from a village of like 100 people. Like 100 people is like most we can consume of like lives, deaths, marriages, friendship. Like it's like 100 people around your village, like the most you can consume. Today, we have like 7-8 billion people's worth of stuff on our phone, on news, and only the bad shit comes to you.
Within seconds.
And then like every time you watch it, like the sense I get is like, I'm like, man, the world's falling apart. And maybe it is, but like, I'm just like, how helpful is that to me and to the people around me for me to have that in my mind? Personally, not that helpful. So I just block it out. So that's my one thing. It's like, it's like what I consume, but then also I then intentionally consume some things that like someone might say, a high performer might say, what a waste of your time. But for me, if I do it with intention, it's good. So for example, my wife and I, we watch Netflix each night for an hour. And like, I try and not be on my phone. I don't do emails. I don't do Slack. I don't do work stuff beyond 6 o'clock. So that's, again, one of my non-negotiables. Now, life's changed a little bit, now that I'm on a journey to raise $1 million for charity through writing the cookbook. That is work. I'm not getting paid for it, but the reality is that is work. I only have so many hours in the day. So like my wife and I have kind of had this discussion is like, look, while I'm doing that pursuit and I still have to work full time with Domain, I still work 40 hours. Some things have to give and take. So sometimes she might be watching, one of her shows that she loves watching, and I'm like, this is not my jam. Yeah. There's kind of like an agreement that, okay, in those moments is where I might be doing whatever for that particular task. And then finally, I'm good at giving long-winded answers. Apologies, everybody. Finally, 8 hours sleep. Yeah. That is a non-negotiable for me. So I try and and it's comical to most of my friends, to everybody in my life. No one does it like I do. Again, I'm flexible. I'm in bed at 7:30. I have a 1.5-year-old son. We try and if he wakes up early in the morning, I pick him up, we bring him to the gym, pass him around, me and my mate as we're doing, doing weights. He loves it. We love it. And then my wife gets to sleep a little bit longer. So I'm in bed at 7:30. I'm asleep by 8:05. So now with daylight savings, so we're in Sydney, it's bright outside. So I like to send photos to my friends and be like, good night. And some of them are investment bankers and they're just getting started. And some people have to work longer, and that's it. I guess I'm lucky that I built my life, because we built our own business. I built my life around hey, my best stuff happens in the morning. When I go through those seasons I talked about, I will always front load the work. So maybe in those seasons let's say in those early days in the business, it's a really big day. Yeah. I start at 5. Some days I might start at 5 and be at my desk at 5:10. But then at 6, I'm done because my brain, my energy's gone, my brain's gone, and I'm kind of spinning wheels. I'm not actually performing. I'm just doing hours.
Yeah. That's it. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's you've created your life by design, by the actions that you've made. And it's cool to hear about your non-negotiables as well, because it obviously seems like it's having a positive effect now that you're working a full-time job. And I heard you say in a different podcast that you'd work about 1 to 2 hours before and after work as well for the cookbook too.
Yes, that's right.
And obviously you do the traveling for the podcast as well. So your workload's probably increased or somewhat the same level, but you're still doing the same load, but you're able to cope and manage it at a different level.
100%. And the last thing I'll add on to that is there is different types of work. Yeah. There's work that takes your energy and then work that gives you energy. Yeah. So today's a huge day, right? I woke up at 4. I was on a plane to Melbourne. I was doing a bunch of stuff for a broadsheet collaboration for Domain. Then I got on a plane at 3 p.m. I'm here in Brisbane. We'll finish up at 7. I'm on a plane. I'll be home at 11, right? So that goes against every non-negotiable I just talked about, but that's the flexibility. But having these conversations, meeting cool people, doing stuff that I know has a huge purpose and drive gives me energy. So I'll go home tonight. I'll be pumped. Yeah. Get me back to folding brochures. And I'm not doing story. I'm not doing that till 11 p.m. I've got to break it up.
Yeah, no, I relate with that because I work a full-time job and do the podcast on the side. But for me, it doesn't really feel like work because it just fills my cup up so much.
Yes.
So when you're really on that path that feels aligned to your mission and your values, it's kind of hard for anything to kind of push you off track from that.
Totally.
Yeah, and especially quickly before we move on and back to the subconscious mind and consuming content in your environment, subconscious mind runs 90 to 95% of your life. So your subconscious mind programs it all for you to absorb this information to use to go out into the world and use that information. So it's you got to be very, really careful on what you actually consume.
100%. And the part that I realized, how I realized I was processing it subconsciously was I'd pick up and again, I thought this was a secret weapon. This one probably happens to heaps of people. I'd pick up an email, I'd read it, I'd mark as unread. People tell you not to do that, but hey, I'm human. I did it. And then I wouldn't think about it, or I thought I wouldn't think about it. And I'd pick up that email again a few hours later, maybe the next day. I never read emails before bed, ever, ever, ever. That's the one thing I definitely do not do because that sticks in your brain. But then I'd wake up and I would just start typing and the words, the answers, everything would just come out of my fingertips. And I'm like, what a superpower. And that's exactly it. Everything's happening subconsciously. I'm processing that. And obviously that's adding to the load. And
you get in that flow state as well.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question, back in the early on in your story, because I know, especially in the world now, there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs. And you were at the part where you were a chef, but you had the ambition or the dream to do something bigger and to make a change. Could you talk to me a bit around the mindset shift that you had to create from going from a stable full-time job and stable income to then doing something with a lot of uncertainty involved in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my... I guess I talk a lot about, the gifts and things that I'm lucky at. It's the things that I can't control and the things that other people may not have in their life, and I didn't get to choose them. One of my things that I'm so grateful for is my parents have the itchiest feet in the whole world. They cannot sit still. So they lived in 22 different houses in South Africa just because they would get bored after 2 years or they would want to build something or do something, whatever. My brother never went to a high school longer than 2 years. So what that meant was... We as brothers and me as an individual, I don't see change as a scary thing remotely. Like I love it. Like right now, like, you know, people are like, what's the next thing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not thinking about that. I love the uncertainty. Yeah. I'm like that, like, and the uncertainty, there's opportunities. And I'm like, I'm like frothing, you know? And they're like, what's it going to be? Have you thought? I'm like, no, I haven't thought about any of that. Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't, like, but I'm like, I'll do something, but I don't know what it is. And I love that. And so I, when you say that, like, I can't even reflect to like this moment of being like, I'm scared and uncertain. Yeah. Because it was just exciting. Like, and I guess the last gift, if you will, was I was on 42 grand a year. You know, I was on 42 grand a year. I work 60 hours a week. It's less than minimum wage. So there was no big leap. You know, the biggest thing I see now these days is, you know, I'm 31 years old. I'm the only one in a friendship group for a long period of time that had done that kind of jump from full-time to role. A lot of my friends, you know, climbing in terms of salary, I actually see it as a much scarier thing. Now, I'm not saying that to scare people away as at age 30, at age 40, at age 50 to start their own business, but the reality is the longer the time gets on, the higher your spending becomes, the harder it is to start something. Yeah. I had really low spending. You know, I've always had low spending, and 42 grand wasn't going to be hard to match. Yeah. And so those are the things that I guess I'm super lucky because I guess it wasn't intentional. It wasn't an intentional mindset that I had to go through. But for anybody, let me take it, like, what are the key takeaways? Because someone's like, well, that's not my life. So thanks, Frank. It's like, key takeaway is like, the reality is your job. I heard it best from a girl called Bridget Loudon last week. I was on a panel with her and she said, that was my rock bottom. Because at any stage I can leave and come back and do that job. Yeah. So I've got my new baseline, which is this job. This job, let's say, pays you 70 grand, 80 grand, whatever it might be. That's my new baseline. So if I go and do something and fail, I can come back. Yeah,
you've always got a job to come back to or find another job.
That's right. Yeah. So like reframe that mindset and be like, okay, cool, let me give it a red hot crack.
It's true because you don't lose the skill set that you have already. So you can always go back to it, worst comes to worst.
You don't lose it. I could technically, I don't know how I could do it, but I could technically go back to becoming a chef. Yeah. And after a year, I'd be probably back to where I was then. And that's been 11 years or 10, 11 years. So I have deep confidence. Unless your job was, you know, let's say something that you need a registration for. You know, I can't think of every permutation of every job, but I'm sure that most of the listeners, a good portion, 70, 80%, would be like, oh yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. Especially chefing as well. I worked in kitchens for about 6 years and it's a tough gig.
It's a tough gig. It sure is.
It's cool. Like, I want to transition now into your cookbook and that mission because it seems so cool, like raising $1 million for charity. Like, going back into the roots of what you're passionate for, which is food, but then also doing it in a way where it gives value to the world. Like, what's the big why behind that, and how did that idea come about?
Yeah, so you'll start to notice trends here. A lot of the good stuff comes when I'm walking with my amazing wife. I was walking with her, and I was going through this challenge where I was listening to and consuming. Like, I love content. I love consuming content. I love people's generosity. And I think that's part of like wanting to do all this is like, hey, if there's value, I want to give it. But I love hearing people's stories. And I would consume so many stories about people who've sold their business. You know, it was getting to that pointy end that I needed to consume. And I heard a story over and over again. It was the same story. It was that story I shared, which is like, you know, someone sells for a big number, anticipation. You know, you've been in fight or flight for so long, and then what else?
Yeah, so what's my purpose?
What's my purpose? And that was the big thing. That was the big thing that popped up was, what is my purpose? And so this was maybe 3-4 weeks after the deal had closed. And I was like, I could already feel that like my brain, the way it's wired was like, what's next? You know, something. You know, and I was like, I didn't like that feeling. I was like, I could extrapolate out. I had an amazing, a guy that had gone through this process, and he had this amazing story, which I won't bother with today. But it's ultimately like he had someone in his life who said, like, I did that. I chased till I was 60, and then I retired, and then I was on my deathbed. And hearing that, and I was just like, I don't want to be that. I could see that happening to me. I could see myself just being the chase, next business, and then realize one day, like, well, if none of those businesses had like deep impact, and as much as I love my business, like in the end of the day, I help real estate agents make it really streamlined to transact properties, which helps vendors. That's awesome. Yeah. But it's not. I'm not curing lives. I'm not saving the world. So it doesn't have like deep impact. And so I was like, if I don't have businesses that do that, then there's probably a big portion of them is commercial, and I'm a commercial guy. But like, do I want to do that? And so I was walking, and then I came to this real. I was like, okay, cool. Then I'll just chill. And I was like, it doesn't feel right either. Just chilling doesn't feel right either, because I was like, I realized that like I all these things that were given to me as gifts in life. You know, I mean, we're in Australia. It's an amazing country. There's opportunities galore. That's a gift. Other people don't get that. Okay. I have a skill set that has been created and crafted over the last 10 years through content, through people around me, through everything. And now I have these skills. That's a gift. And I kind of layered these all onto each other. I was like, that's a lot of gifts to then just move on with your life and settle down and be in a hammock. And
Dust your hands.
And then I realized, okay, I've got to reframe my mind. Like maybe I have an obligation, so now I'm in this percentile, whatever percentage of the world in terms of wealth, whatever. I have these skill sets but I also have a giving heart. Like I want to give to people. There's nothing more satisfactory. And so then I reframed my brain and went like, okay, I now have an obligation. Yeah. And I went, cool. What does that look like? Yeah. And within this one walk, I came up with this goal, which was like, what would it look like to raise $1 million? To do it for something that wasn't for me, wasn't for my family, wasn't for directly people in my life. What does it look like for people that don't have these gifts? And I went, okay, cool. That's my starting position, $1 million. How do I do it? And I was like, well, I don't get to be really creative anymore these days. Like, the role as a CEO becomes less and less creative, as well as your executional ability as your business scales. We had a team of about 350 people. We're now part of an ASX listed company. I don't really have the ability to execute at pace, and I just love executing. Like I love moving at pace, and said, okay, cool. So those are my two things I want to do in order to get there. Maybe I should tie it back to food. And I was like, okay, that'll bring the creativity out of me, because I was like, I need like a Trojan horse. What's my Trojan horse to get here? And then I came up with this idea. Okay, I'm going to write a cookbook for high performing people who are time poor and health conscious, and through that, 100% of the revenue is going to go to charity. And that was it. And then from that one walk, I just went home. I wrote that down on paper. The takeaway for everybody here: if you have a business idea, one of the best things I learned from the same guy, every time he has a business idea, he gets a slide deck, and he puts the name of the idea. He puts what would be the goal, what's how do you get to the outcome, some little bit of research, and just put 5 pages. I just put it there and I put it together, and that's something I now do every time. So he once showed me, we were out, and he shows me his Google Slides, and he's just got tens and tens and tens of these. And I was like, man, that's so crazy. Yeah, some of these are just like over a beer, and a mate says, what about this idea? We just start jamming on the idea. So I'm a bit of a loser. Like I love business. So that gets me excited. And it's honestly is like, and so every time I just came up with a new idea, I put it in there. And so long story short, it was around like creating something that had deep purpose beyond myself, creating something that could give me energy to fill up my bucket, the things I wasn't getting currently, which is creativity, which was execution, and then finally having something that each and every day had a purpose that I could be like, okay, cool, this is my new thing that isn't just self-serving.
Yeah, and plus I've been watching the journey as well and the content. You're just having fun with it too. Like you just
having so much fun. And I'm just getting started. I am who I am. And I am a goofy guy. I'm a bit of a weird guy. I'm a bit of a character, and I just that's me. And I just put it all out on the table and just have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Have a bit of fun with it. And do you know what charity you've picked yet, or is it going to come more towards when you get?
So no. So that was part of my journey. And this is my thing: is I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to move at pace. So I started the journey in May this year. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have Instagram until May this year. Because I was all about what do I consume, and did Instagram serve me at that time? It didn't. It didn't serve me while I was doing my business. Now I'm like, I need to have an audience of people who are invested in this journey. So when I launch the cookbook, it explodes.
Yeah, you got people there ready.
Got people there ready to go. And so then I started my Instagram in May, and I just started moving. And some people are like, well, what's the charity? You can't just use the word the charity. And I'm like, well, I got to move because that's going to take time. So I can do everything in parallel and bring people along for the journey. Like, what do people want? It's equally important for me to be passionate about something than it is to get the audience passionate, because then hey, maybe they don't love cooking but they want to help this thing, maybe they do love cooking, so it's like trying to serve every different element so that we can get to the goal. So answer your question is, I have a recent son, he's 1.5 years old, and I was like, it's got to be something to do with children. I went to do a thing with some friends, some people from business, and we went and cooked at Ronald McDonald House. Part of this journey was like, I wanted to find the charity, but in my mind, and I don't know if this is going to be bad to say, but the reality is a charity is a business, but the money isn't going to their bank account, it's going into purpose.
Yeah, well, it serves.
And so therefore, and this is nothing, the Ronald McDonald House is amazing. It's an amazing charity, but just side noting that is, I was like, I need to get a sense of that charity or business or organization. I need to see, are they efficient? If I go and kind of run this journey, which is like, let's do $1 million, and then 900 grand of it is paid for overheads, Like I haven't really done much, right? Yeah. So I was like, it's on me. It's my job to find one that I think can show that we can show impact and we can show that what we've done. And so I've been kind of spending time with different charities in parallel to working and So I went to the Ronald McDonald House. We cooked for the kids there, and it was like heartbreaking. Like it was heartbreaking. And so that moment I realized it's got to be something to do with kids, because I could feel the passion inside me. Like, all right, like I said, I'm really lucky. My son's very healthy. How do I help people that don't have that same thing? And so then I met a guy. None of this is super official, so I won't say the name of the charity as of yet. But I met an amazing guy because we need to do the paperwork and et cetera, et cetera. But I met an amazing guy who had whose son got leukemia at age 4, and he found it on a Christmas Eve. Yeah. And he tells this story, and I was like, and he's now an ambassador, and I was like, this has got to be it. Like this has got to be it, because like this guy is like, you know, as equally passionate as I am about business and about this journey. Like I need someone on the other side who's passionate about the particular charity, and like I can't be able to say, hey, this resonates me from this deep place, because it hasn't happened to me, and I really hope it never happens to me. But he can. And so I'm like, I need someone that's like that. And through that, again, it all comes down to like, by having that, we then, you know, touch as many, I guess, hearts as possible. And then through that, we get to the goal as quickly as possible.
Yeah. One important lesson you touched on there was you didn't have to have everything in perfect order to start it. A lot of people think they have to be amazing to start. But you have to start so it can become amazing. You got to start first so you can grow the thing. You got to plant the seed before the tree grows. You know?
100%.
You just got to start, and then from there on, you just figure it out where you want to do, connect with more people. And eventually, you start figuring out what the whole path is.
That is exactly right. So that is like, if I boil my life down and I boil the one skill that I have, but I have been curating over time. So this is the one that I can call, it started off as a gift, but I kept nurturing it, is pace. Yeah. So, you know, your poor listeners having to hear me talk at my pace I do, I'm trying to even tone it down. Everything has to be at pace. Like everything has to be at pace. So like, I'm so passionate about this idea that is like, we can both come up with an idea. An idea, I'm sorry to say, is worth nothing. It's about execution, right? And I don't want to offend anybody there, but it's just like, reality is it's all about execution. We can come up with an idea. Yeah. You can spend the next 2 years, and I say the word 2 years because I've now seen through my journey people that have had an idea 2-3 years later. I'm with some I've been speaking to lately. It's been 3.5 years. They haven't launched. Yeah. But my God, their business case, their business study, their thing is so crystal clear. Every permutation of what every customer hypothetically wants is incredibly crystal clear. Yeah. But they haven't yet had a customer, so you actually don't know. I could do that same idea, and I'm not saying I can do every idea, right? Like I've got so many skills missing, so I probably couldn't do the idea, but I could do an idea, and within 6 months, and 6 months is a long time frame for my brain, but like within 6 months, I could be launching. Again, can't be rocket. It can't be like I'm launching a rocket company, but anyway, bear with me, everybody. Within 6 months, I could be launching this easy idea, and then I could be going, and I can get my customer feedback. My first customer feedback might be like, Frank, this is not good. Good. I'm really glad to hear that feedback, because now I can find out what do you want, and I can iterate. And by the time I get to that 3.5 year milestone, I've now heard from 50, 100, 150, 200, whatever number of customers who've given me constant feedback in reality. Like the feedback is good to go to a customer like, hey, what would you like? Compared to like, I'm sending them an invoice each month. Yeah. Times are tough. Are they going to cancel me? And if they're going to cancel me, why are they going to cancel me? Like if you're getting money from them, they're going to tell you if things are bad, and that's what I want to know. And so like everything, so my podcast I recently launched, Chew the Fat, is around. I had an idea when I was on holidays with my wife. We're going for a walk, and I just had this word pop into my brain. It was like chew the fat, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting words. And I was like, that could be a cool podcast name. I was like, oh, the guests could eat food and the ties into the cookbook. Before I left that holiday, 5 days later, I had 5 guests lined up. And I called my content guy, and I said, like, hey, I've got this idea for this podcast. And by the end of the week, I go, like, we've got our first guest in 2 weeks. Let's figure out how to do a podcast. Because it's like, when I launch the first episode, I'm going to have 7 people listen. No one's going to care. So like, who cares? Like, and then we get to learn rapidly around, like, we just get to have some self-criticism and make sure we ask the right questions to get people to give us like critical feedback. And And so then I couldn't, because one of the big things was with podcasts, you may know the stat that 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 20.
Yeah.
And of those 90% that don't make it past episode 20, 90% of those won't make it past episode 40. Yeah. So in my mind, I was like, all I need to do is get to episode 41. I'm in the top 1%. So how do I do that? I got to do it really fast.
On your resume.
Yeah. And so so just boiling it down again for everybody. It's like pace is so important. Don't overthink things. Like, it's really good to have a great business plan, but this is the way I think about it. If you can think about the things to 80% and you spend 6 weeks doing that, fantastic. You can spend the next 6 months, there's diminishing returns, to refine that down to 85, 90% accuracy. That amount of time could be way better spent in execution and learn from your execution.
Yeah, and the amount of lessons you're going to learn that journey as well, because you can't hold yourself back of fear of you're going to lose, or you fear you're going to fail or whatnot.
Yeah.
Because you're going to learn so much along that journey. You're going to learn more by taking the action than just stewing about the idea.
Exactly,
not taking the action.
Exactly right. Like, how do you feel compared to your first episode to today's episode?
Oh, unreal. My first episode, I was stuttering, I was nervous.
Yeah.
I recorded my first ever podcast episode in the middle of Brisbane City Library.
Perfect.
So one microphone in the middle of the table, 200 people in the background talking.
I love it.
It was horrible. The podcast is still up there for everyone to listen to, but the growth that comes from me just doing it, trial and error. And then eventually I get to where I am now. I reflect back in hindsight, I'm like, I'm glad I just bit the bullet and done it.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You could still be thinking, you could still be having your best plan of how you're going to do it. And then you get on the microphone, you're stuttering.
Exactly, yeah. And coming back was with sales, with podcasting, with networking, with leadership, it all comes down to communication skills.
Yes.
How did you curate? How did you learn communication? Mm-hmm. Or was it something that you had from a young age you're able to communicate? Where did that skill set come in for you?
So I'm going to pause there, Ryan, and just say, good job on the questions. Everybody paying attention out there. These are some good questions. Well done. And you could tell it's not your first episode. Yeah. So that would be one of my things I'd put in the basket that is a gift, but I'd had to nurture it. Right, I've had to nurture it, and I've been really intentional about that one, and that's why I guess I'm saying thanks for the question. Sorry, I keep looking at Drake, going respect, bro. So I had this thing in me that there was a pivotal moment in my life when I was younger, and I haven't really shared this, but I wanted to be an actor, right? And so I did drama and food tech, and in year 9, those two things clashed, so I had to pick one or the other, and I was like, oh my god, I was like, this changes everything, and so I went with food because that was my forever passion. But from that age, I was comfortable, terrible at doing it, but comfortable with the idea of doing speeches. So the one thing I did well in my HSC, whatever we call it these days, but my schooling, my high school, was when I had to do speeches, but then everything else kind of sucked. Yeah. I barely passed. And so from there, probably years and years later, I got thrust into the role of sales. And so I had no idea how to sell. I was so nervous. I remember my first sales opportunity. I've never shared this one. I like this is good questions because I get to stretch my brain and get to share new things. My first sales opportunity was a tiny real estate office. The person did about 15 deals a year. In our game, that's really small. I sat in her office. Her dad was there, who was maybe 85. It was the most chillaxed sales pitch you could ever do. She's there, her dad's there. He's like, hey, Sean, how are you? Really relaxed. And I'm shaking. I'm so nervous. I'm panicking. And from there, it was about repetition, but more important than repetition was I had to learn from somewhere. So this is the big thing for everybody who's listening today. Good step. You're trying to consume and you're trying to learn, and you're trying to learn from people that are walking different paths of life. I did that from an early age. I got a sales program from Grant Cardone, if anybody knows him. And I would practice scripts and dialogues every morning. Yeah. I would record my audio from my phone. I would listen to myself, and I would intentionally go what could I do better next time? And I would do that constantly for years and years and years. So communication, although may sound natural coming from my voice today, is something that I had to practice and practice and practice. So whether it be TED Talks, I would watch TED Talks. I would watch Steve Jobs' speech for his alumni from that one university thing. I would watch his presentations, and I'm like, what is he doing? And I would try and reverse engineer, and I would constantly listen. And I would constantly trying to self-critique and then critique others, but not from a you're not so good, but more like, okay, like what could you have done better in my mind? What did you do really well? And so I'm just continuously trying to like unravel this idea. And still to this day, like I'll share this is like, still to this day, I will listen to stuff over. I did it this literal morning and I wrote down, what am I doing that I need to change? And some of it's ingrained in you. Some of it's ingrained in you. This is the stuff that I do with my sales team is I had them play their pitches to me. So a lot of it's over Zoom these days. So you can record it really simply. So I get them to play their pitches over Zoom. I would then literally go like, and we'd break down like, what are the things that you could be doing differently? And some of it was like to myself, to my point, is it's ingrained in you. It's human nature. So one of my things that I picked up recently is I say, I love that. Yeah. Now I do that in conversations. Like I love that because I'm trying to give you, not you, but the individual I'm having a conversation with, I'm trying to give them like positive reinforcement, make them feel heard. But on like when you hear it in repetition in a conversation, you don't know me, it maybe sounds disingenuous. It maybe sounds like I'm a little bit simple because I don't have another way to say it. Whereas there is other ways to make someone feel that way. So I'm still doing it today. And now that I'm 31, it's way harder. It's way harder to strip that back. But it's like, I think it's like for everybody, it's like some of these things, like for me, I think communication is one of the most important things. Like yes, sales, but then like, if you want to run a business, you're gonna have to have people you sell to, sure, but you're gonna have internal people. So like, who are your internal stakeholders? Who are your employees? Who are the people? Who are your suppliers? Like, you need to be able to crisply and sharply share your vision with people so that they understand what you're saying. You know, one of the common things I hear is people say like, you know, my manager, my boss, my leader, whatever, has things in their head, they can't communicate it. I go on a rabbit hole for 3 days. I come back and they're like, that's not right. And you're like, well, yeah, it's not right because you didn't properly share it with me. But then that leader might be like, no, you just didn't understand me. And it's like, no. And so I always take that view. It's on me to communicate clearly and then you can get so much done.
Yeah, that's absolute gold there for the listeners here to dive into that. Now, I want to be cautious with times. I've got one final question for you. But feel free to answer it how you feel. Because Frank, as a leader in life, so you're a father, you're a husband, you ran businesses, you got family. Like there's so many aspects in life where you have to be a leader. What are some of the core values that you look to when it comes to leadership of life?
Ooh, far out, Ryan. Good job. Okay, let me think about that on the spot. So I think I look for things that I try and hold myself to first and foremost. So there's certain things that I've kind of over time realized what's really important to me. It's something it's funny. Me and my wife were in a car last week and I said to her, what are your life like? What are your values that are important to you? And she said, I'm a bit sick at the moment. I probably don't going to answer because I'm not feeling that great. What are yours? I was like, okay. And so what's really important to me is like, I am really big on transparency. Like I'm really big on transparency. I think why that came to me was because as I got busier and busier and busier, I realized that like if I tell someone a different story or tell it in a different way or hide certain elements, I'm going to get caught out so quickly because I'm going to forget my stories, right?
If not now, eventually.
Yeah, if not now, eventually. And so like I just was like, I just going to be as transparent. Like there's obviously guardrails. When you're running a business, there's certain things you can't talk about. Like when I was in that 9-month deal process, people in the office would see me stressed. They would have no idea why because I can't tell them. But there's certain things. So transparency is really, really big to me. Integrity is so big to me. And I say that with probably a little bit of like on my face because there is times in life where I haven't been 100% honest. And those things burn me up because I realize like I'm just doing the wrong thing. And like, so like I say that, not saying that I've done it every minute right for my whole life. These things I think like you have to work on and like you've got to hold yourself to high regard. So integrity for me is like, I'm a man of my word. So like, you know, only recently did I have someone who I had to cancel on 3 times to come to a meeting with them and like burns me up. I never met the person. I never knew the person, but like the idea that I told them I was going to be there and I didn't 3 times, like that kills me. So like, I think like being true to your word is so important. And so like, and that's like even a muscle I have to stretch these days where like the easy thing to say when someone comes to you and goes, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. For me these days, like, hey, I want you to invest in my business or this thing. And like the easy thing today is like, oh, sure. Like, let me, like, and then you almost kick that can down the road, like practicing that, like, hey, if I just graciously say no now, it's actually going to serve them and it's going to serve me. And so like trying at all times to be a man of my word is really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Then what else with a leader? I think for me, a leader needs to be inspirational, and you set the tone and you set the energy of a room. Yeah. And so this was something, again, like I always try and check in with my team to be like, what can I do better? What can I do better? What can I do better? And not because I want them to say, no, you're so great, Frank, you're amazing. Like, I don't care about that. I always try to surround myself with like not yes people. And one of the things that'd be like, is like, you know, I said before, I don't get stressed, but what happens is like my face will show signs of, like, and for everybody listening, not watching right now, I'm scrunching my face. And so because my office, I did have a door in my office, as controversial as that was, but it was all glass. People could see that. And like, I was always setting the tone. And remember, there's 100 people in this office. We've got multiple of them. I'm setting the tone of the 100 people office with the look on my face. Yeah. And so it's like knowing that you set the energy, you set the tone, is like you have to kind of have, like, it's okay to go through stress. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. But it's like you have to kind of, as a leader, you have to kind of quickly bounce those things off, and you have to find your people that you can talk these things through, so that you can, when you come into that room, you can set your best tone, your best energy. So these days, like if I'm feeling that way, I may not go to the office, you know, like, because like, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to shake this today. I don't want to bring that in. Yeah. So understanding that you have to be the energy is really, really critical. And then the last thing I'll touch on there is like, I'm a big believer in leading from the front. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that I can do every role in the business. There is no way I can. You know, we have software engineers, we have marketing gurus, we have all these things that are way more skilled than me. But when it comes to the understanding, I need to know enough to be dangerous. Yeah. So what I saw in my time is I saw people say to me, you know, I'd ask the CEO of a company, you know, what is the tech stack that you guys are running? And they'll be like, oh, I'll have to talk to the engineering team and come back to you. I'm like, you're a tech business. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got to know those things. So like for me, like, I always want to know, you know, so we started a video production arm of our business, which we recently sold, but we started that 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. And I was like, I need to pick up a camera. I need to know how to turn it on. And I need to hypothetically know how to do a shoot. Yeah. I'm not going to be the best in the room. I'm not going to be anywhere close. But by knowing it, by knowing the nuance, number one, I can know if someone has done a good job. Yeah. So saying to someone in your business, you've done a good job, is fine. Yeah. To say to someone with around some detail, to say, let me use the video production as an example. Wow, that color grade is epic. Like, how did you get the colors to look so good? Like, how did you get the cuts to look so good? Let me take it to tech. Holy shit, like, how did you get those buttons to work on that particular page? Like, did you have to nest multiple layers? And now I'm starting to talk mildly their language. And I truly believe what I'm saying. I'm not just making it up. Yeah. And then you see the excitement in their face, because it's like, yes, you understand how hard this is, and you appreciate me.
They feel seen.
They feel seen, and that's super special. Yeah. Number two, on the more cynical side, someone saying to you, yeah, that job's going to take 45 hours. If you have no idea about anything, you're like, okay, but it might take 2, right? And so like, by understanding some of it, it really helps you make sure that you know who are A grade players in your business and who are Z grades. Yeah. And by knowing that nuance, you know, I'm a big believer that I want to protect who comes into this business. I want high performers to come in. And when I have high performers and lower performers, we got to get them out, right? Because we want the culture of everybody like pumped and like wanting to do cool shit together.
100%. So I say, Frank, thank you for your time, brother.
No worries. My pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good one.